Thanks, Don. So thanks to the Fish Commission and the Lake Committees for the invitation to speak at the Common Session. Today we'll learn a little bit about a juvenile Lake Sturgeon Index survey that's being implemented on Lake Superior and Lake Huron at the present time, and learn about some possibilities for the future. So I guess real quickly, this has come about after years of sitting at the Lake Superior Tech Committee and hearing about the Spring Lake Trout Index Survey, which has been done for years to track the rehabilitation progress. The data is used to help set quotas, all kinds of benefits to this standardized and consistent effort across Lake Superior for lake trout. It kind of occurred to me that it would be useful to have something like this for sturgeon. There were a lot of other things that were taking place kind of at the same time. Canada was looking at a fall walleye index netting protocol to apply to Lake Sturgeon. Some work by Gliffwick and Bad River off of the mouth of the Bad River was showing that juveniles were vulnerable to the gears that they were using. So a number of things came together to start generating this idea. There was a session similar to this. We hold Lake Sturgeon coordination meetings on a regular basis to bring folks together around the Great Lakes to talk about Lake Sturgeon issues. It was presented at one of those meetings in 2008, and I guess we're kind of a slow progression through to where we are today. Certainly everyone's familiar with this this scene here, the historic overharvest of lake sturgeon throughout the Great Lakes. So we're all kind of at a similar situation across the lakes with extirpated populations or at least severely depleted populations across the basin. And understandably, there are many management plans now, or rehabilitation plans, to try and reverse that and build up lake sturgeon populations. And there's about 15 of those in existence, or was a few years ago. There's probably a few more in existence now that address lake sturgeon in the Great Lakes waters. A number of these plans address single populations or embayments. And there's certainly no consistent approach or standardized mechanism to examine status within or among lake basins. And this becomes a challenge for a number of reasons. This is a bit blurry, but oftentimes we're asked to report on a lake-wide basis or a basin-wide basis what are the status of different species. And lake sturgeon are one of those that for the state of the lakes reporting, we try to put together a status both across all lakes and then within a lake. We also get requests when there's lake-wide management plans. What is the status of lake sturgeon across the entire Lake Superior Basin? So our efforts, if we're working on an individual population, which often happens, an agency will work on the population within their jurisdiction, we have no way to really compare and examine what's taking place across the lake as a whole. Then, as good fortune would have it, the Coordinated or Cooperative Science and Monitoring Initiative hit Lake Superior at the same time that Great Lakes Restoration Initiative money came into existence, and we were able to put the two efforts together and utilize funds from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to put forward toward a cooperative lake-wide effort on Lake Superior. And this index survey developed that I'm going to talk to you about was a product of the Lake Superior Lake Sturgeon Work Group. It was developed by the 20 or so members of that work group. Josh Schlescher, who we were able to hire with GLRI funds at the time. I don't know if Josh is still in the room or not, but he was the lead for coordinating this effort within the work group. And as you see here, these are the participants that have participated on both Lake Superior and Lake Huron, the agencies. And it's an impressive list of folks who got together to do a joint project within the Lake Superior and Lake Huron basins. And I don't know that there's anything that compares to this, where we have this number of agencies literally applying a consistent field protocol and being out in the field at the same time. So it's an impressive effort, and I think it bodes well for where we're headed for lake sturgeon. So what were our survey objectives? There were three key ones. Describe the current lake-wide status of juvenile lake sturgeon. and juveniles being considered in that range of about 4 to 15 years of age. Some of those 10 to 15 maybe sub-adult as well, but generally those younger ages. We wanted to establish an index of relative abundance for juveniles to monitor recruitment, to try and track some year class strength changes, and then look at population trends over time. And then last, we wanted to describe and compare some of the biological characteristics within and among locations throughout a lake and over time. So this was what we set out to do. On Lake Superior, we had this coordinated or cooperative science and monitoring initiative in place. We designed an effort that each one of these locations would be sampled in a single year, and that was 2011. So we were able to put our effort across the entire lake in one season. The design that was established and utilized was to essentially create a radius around each river mouth that either currently or historically was known to support sturgeon. You see in the pink is a 0 to 2 kilometer zone, the yellow is a 3 to 5 kilometer zone, and the blue is a 6 to 10 kilometer zone out from that river mouth as the center of that radius. We set nets in those ratios that you see there, 6 nets in the inner, 6 in the intermediate, and 4 in the outer zones. Lake Huron had a slightly different approach, but similar, more in the inner and then fewer as you moved away from the river mouth. The nets were 1,000-foot mono nets that were composed of 600 feet, 2 panels of 300, foot of 4.5, and then 200 foot of 8-inch and 200 foot of 10-inch. All the nets were set within the depth zone of 3 to 15 meters, and this is directly from the FWIN guidelines, fall walleye index netting in Canada. As fish were captured, we collected standard information from those fish that we might expect from most: length, weight, girth, checked for tags and gave tags, and then tissue samples and fin ray for aging. So we applied this effort across the Lake Superior, as I mentioned, in 2011, and our results here, we effort extended from June to September. We'd hoped to confine it to a tighter window, but practical things come into play, and but we were able to accomplish all sites throughout the season. 445 fish sampled across the U.S. and Canada, and 17 locations. So there were a number of river mouths that are very close proximity to one another, and that radius that I showed you fell within both of those river mouths. So 17 locations covered the 22 spawning tributaries. And then, of course, there were concerns when we embarked upon this related to bycatch in particular, but also some concerns among individuals of whether the taking of a fin ray for aging would cause injury and harm the fish in a way that we might have excessive mortality. The results of this effort, if we look across all locations sampled, this is our catch per unit effort, so catch per 1,000 feet of net. You see ranges from a high over on the eastern end in the Gooley River of 8.5 on this end of the lake, and then some of the locations where there's were zero catch of lake sturgeon throughout the effort. And you'll notice may notice the red and green if you're not colorblind. That the circles are extirpated populations. There were a handful of those, the Prairie River, I guess a couple of those, and the Montreal River that we have no evidence of any sort of spawning or population where we did capture some fish off those river mouths. Part of this effort, of course, now is to find out if those fish are associated with any of the rivers in which they were caught off of. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So in Lake Huron, a similar effort was put forth in 2012. This was primarily or by Lloyd's office, I guess also the Anishinaabe, Ontario, and some DFO work as well. So 3 agencies put some effort forth in that area. 221 sturgeon captured, all caught in the North Channel. And in Lake Huron, their concerns related to this were also bycatch, but also the boat traffic and beach use in that nearshore water of 3 to 15 meters. Their catch per unit effort in locations that were sampled range from a high of the Serpent River, it's kind of in the center of the North Channel there, which doesn't show up well on here, but should be a red circle for an extirpated population. And then the Spanish River just to the east, where it was also a 5.3 similar catch per unit effort. And you'll see that the locations in Georgian Bay and southern Lake Huron, there was no lake sturgeon captured. So we'll show a few data slides here of some of the information, size, and age structure of the fish. And you'll recall that we were targeting juvenile fish, and based on these size structures and numbers of fish in the Lake Superior rivers, our target seems to be hitting its mark. We're catching fish generally in that 400 to 1200 millimeter range in all locations. There's a couple of interesting things to note here. We have some, Ontonagon River is a stocked system, and we know there was no fish stocking in one of those years because of some issues with the hatchery setup. So there was a missed year class, and it happens to correspond with this age group here, size group. We don't know if there's some similar things taking place in other populations as well that may be giving us an indication of some missing year classes there. Lake Huron had similar size structure. You see here the units a little different here in centimeters, from 45 up to, again, that about 100 centimeters in length, and the range of sizes and number of fish at each of the locations in which they captured lake sturgeon. These blue and red lines that are shown here were placed on there indicating you see 50% maturity of males and females. There was some interest in knowing whether this approach was capturing fish juveniles or was also encountering some of the adults. And for the most part, you see here, we're very consistent with targeting and capturing juvenile fish. Quickly looking at some of the age structure work, the pooled samples from across Lake Superior, again ranging in that age from 4 up to about 15 years before we start to have a little more erratic catches in those higher ages with the gear selectivity. Certainly the target ranges of juvenile that we were hoping to sample, and the same findings on Lake Huron, perhaps a little more consistent in the 4 to 10 years. And Lloyd, I don't know if it's possible that there aren't many adults in those areas that were sampled, but it seems like we're targeting the juveniles pretty heavily, which is our intent. So I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit here. I mentioned that we're interested in determining if the fish that we catch at a particular location are associated with that river. Well, that's exactly what's being done right now in Lake Michigan. And so I wanted to show some of the information that Rob Elliott provided, but I know a lot of people contributed to it. And I'll try and do my best to walk us through this so that it makes some sense to us. And I'll start by looking at these 4 rivers here and their color codes. So fish that are associated with the Fox River are in this slightly darker blue. Fish that associate with or have genetic consistencies with Michigan rivers are in the maroon. The Menominee River and the Oconto in light blue. So this is work that's been done to describe the genetic makeup of fish in these rivers, and we know that signature. They then went out into the lake and obtained samples from a number of locations. These black and white locations are locations sampled in Green Bay. And with each of those fish that were collected, they grabbed a tissue sample and ran that tissue sample to see where those fish assigned, what population they were assigned to. The same kind of thing we want to do on Lake Huron and Lake Superior. And the pie charts then show the proportions of which of those populations they assigned to. So if we look down in the southern Green Bay area, we see that the samples that were collected in this area assigned to the Oconto Pestigo primarily, with a handful of fish or a proportion of fish to the Fox and Menominee rivers, pretty specific to the Green Bay systems. If we look up here in the Washington Island area in Door County. Samples that were collected within this area, they assigned to a number of different locations around the lake in little different proportions. So we're able to look and see where are these fish coming from that we're encountering. This has implications for management in terms of harvest. If we're trying to protect a particular population, it's helpful to know where those stocks are or where those fish are coming from. If we're looking to protect something in the Oconto-Peshtigo River, we probably want to focus our efforts in the southern area of Green Bay, perhaps more so than some of these other areas around the lake. So a lot of implications for this type of analysis, and it's great to see what they've been able to accomplish on Lake Michigan, and again, we're hoping to get there on Lake Superior and Lake Huron as well. So I want to revisit our survey objectives very quickly, and you see here it was to describe the current status of juveniles in the lake, establish that index of relative abundance, and allow us to monitor recruitment, year class strength, and population trends, and then to compare some of the biological characteristics within and among populations and lakes over time. So can we meet these objectives? And I think we found that our gillnets certainly have captured the targeted size and age range that we've been looking to capture. The 4.5 and 8-inch nets, I guess you can read that there. We also found that we captured a greater number of fish near the tributary mouth, which kind of establishes that was what we were expecting with our survey design. The closer we are associated with the river mouths, the higher likelihood we are to capture juvenile lake sturgeon, and obviously we want to put our hands on fish in order to have some of this information available to us. It has the potential to provide relative abundance for index trend monitoring, but obviously that's highly dependent upon our ability to carry out the work again in the future. So we've established a great baseline for Lake Superior, and they're continuing to work on that in Lake Huron. Now it just remains to be seen if we can repeat these efforts into the future. And then we have potential to evaluate rehabilitation actions, and those that I mentioned, the potential for missing year classes, to start to look at environmental cues that might explain why a particular year class is stronger or weaker. And of course, whenever you're monitoring juveniles, you've got a quicker return on the response from the juveniles rather than waiting until the fish are adults in the spawning run, which is often how we've been able to assess them. So future work, I've mentioned the genetics effort that we've got an agreement with Wendy Stott, or excuse me, with Amy Welsh, who's at West Virginia University. So we'll be providing samples to her from the Lake Superior and Lake Huron efforts. In 2013, they'll be completing the other streams around Lake Huron. At Superior, we're having conversations about the 5-year cycle of the Cooperative Science and Monitoring Initiative, which puts us out at 2016 again. And then there's some discussion in the other lakes about applying the similar protocol. There will be some work done on Lake Ontario this year as well, and I guess I got a couple of slides for just where this future work will take place in 2013. So this is work that will be done in Ontario waters. The black text here, a few locations in Michigan waters, and just reflect the different people that have sent slides. Mike Thomas as well is going to apply this in some of the areas of the Lake St. Clair and St. Clair River. So there's future efforts taking place, and we're kind of expanding this throughout the Great Lakes, and I guess it remains to be seen if we end up coordinating within a basin or within multiple basins as we move forward. And with that, I can take any questions.